Good morning, afternoon, and evening. Welcome to the Global Brief by OneRead.news, where we connect the dots on your world. Today is August 11th, 2025, and we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to take all the news from a single day, from all around the planet, and treat it like one big interconnected story. Let's get into it. So here's our big question for today. You know when you scroll through the news and it just feels like this random, chaotic jumble of stuff? A conflict over here, a wild weather report over there, some political drama somewhere else. It feels disconnected. But what if it's not? What if it's all connected? Today, we're going to be detectives. We're going to look at the headlines as a series of pressures and responses, a giant cause and effect machine. First, we'll look at the big, powerful nations playing chess with the world. Then we'll see how the planet itself is starting to get fed up and flip the whole board over. After that, we'll see how all that pressure trickles down into our own communities, our jobs, our lives. And finally, we'll ask, where, in all this mess, can we still find moments of pure human ingenuity and hope? So can one day really teach us about the entire world? Well, let's find out together.
Okay, let's start with Act 1, the global chessboard. This is the high-stakes world of geopolitics. And you should picture less of a friendly game in the park and more of one of those intense, high-speed chess matches where the players are sweating, they're glaring, they're trying to psych each other out. Every single move, an alliance, a statement, even a trade tariff, it's all a calculated play for power and influence. And it's not just the superpowers making moves. We're seeing it everywhere. I mean, today there's this little diplomatic flare-up between Peru and Colombia over a tiny river island. Seems small, right? But it's the same game, just on a different scale, a test of national pride. But the moves we're about to look at, well, they are on a much, much bigger scale. Let's zoom right in on the highest level of this chessboard, the UN Security Council, which is meeting today about the ongoing offensive in Gaza. And what you see here is a perfect and honestly tragic example of total gridlock. It's almost like everyone's reading from a script they've had for years. The US steps up, defends Israel's right to security. That's their longstanding position. Then, cue China and Russia, who take the floor to condemn the offensive, positioning themselves as the great counterweight to American influence. And while this is all happening, the actual UN officials on the ground are sending these desperate messages warning about starvation and conditions that are, and I quote, beyond horrific. But nothing happens. Why? Because of the veto power. Any one of those 5 permanent members, the US, Russia, China, the UK, or France, can just say no and kill any resolution. So instead of being a place for solutions, the Security Council becomes a stage. It's geopolitical theater, where each side performs for the world. And this paralysis bleeds directly into the information war. Today, we learned 5 Al Jazeera journalists were killed. The IDF alleges one was a Hamas commander. Al Jazeera calls it a targeted assassination of the press. And who are you supposed to believe? See, that's the point. In this environment, truth itself becomes just another weapon.
So what happens when the main stage is frozen in place? Well, the other actors start writing their own scripts. And that brings us to Australia. Now, you gotta understand, Australia is one of America's closest, most reliable allies. They are usually in perfect lockstep on major foreign policy. But not today. Today, Australia announced that they are formally recognizing a Palestinian state. And they were very clear about why, citing the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. This is a huge deal. This is Australia essentially saying, look, we can't wait for Washington or the UN to figure this out anymore. This deadlock is costing human lives, and we are moving on our own. This isn't just some symbolic gesture. This is a crack, a real crack, in a diplomatic consensus that's been held together for decades. It's a flashing red light, showing that the pressure is building so intensely that even the strongest alliances are starting to strain.
And you can feel that exact same we'll-do-it-ourselves energy radiating across Europe. Today, the EU, along with 6 other European nations, put out this joint statement about the war in Ukraine. Now, on the surface, it seems pretty standard, right? Any peace deal must directly involve Ukraine. But in the world of diplomacy, timing is absolutely everything. This statement is a not-so-subtle message, and it's aimed squarely at 2 people, former US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, who are planning to meet. European leaders are clearly terrified of a backroom deal getting cooked up over their heads, some solution for Ukraine that leaves them to deal with all the consequences, so this statement is them planting a flag. As we put it on the slide, this is the most polite, bureaucratic way imaginable of screaming, "Don't you dare decide our fate." It's Europe asserting its own agency, refusing to be just a pawn on the chessboard. Now, at the same time these old alliances are shifting, totally new ones are getting stronger. Just look at the 40-minute phone call today between Brazil's President Lula and Russia's Putin. This wasn't just a friendly chat. This was a strategic huddle. They coordinated on their own version of Ukraine peace plan, they prepped for the next big BRICS summit, and they planned a joint response to new US trade tariffs. That middle one, BRICS, is so important. That's the bloc: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and it's growing. They are explicitly trying to build a counterweight to the US-led world order. So this call is coalition building in real time. And you can see this rewiring of the world happening in other ways too. Today, a new direct shipping route opened up for fresh produce between Morocco and the UK. Now, that might sound boring, but it's not. It's another small example of countries creating new, more direct economic arteries, bypassing the old systems entirely. You're watching the global chessboard being redrawn, one shipping container at a time. Okay, we've spent enough time talking about the human players. For Act 2, let's talk about the chessboard itself. Because the board that we are all playing on, it's starting to buckle. The planet isn't just a passive stage for our dramas, it's an active, unbelievably powerful system. And after absorbing decades of pressure from us, it is beginning to push back. And these aren't problems you can solve with a treaty or a tariff. This is the Earth sending us all a bill. I want you to just sit with this number for a second. 3 to 5 meters. That's 10 to 16 feet. To put that in perspective, that's high enough to completely swallow the ground floor of a 2-story building. This number comes from a terrifying new study out of India, and it's their projection for sea level rise if, or as they suggest, when, the West Antarctic ice sheet collapses. And here's the scariest part. The study warns that the irreversible melting process may have already started. This isn't some sci-fi movie plot set in the 23rd century. This is a scientific warning about our own lifetimes, our children's lifetimes. We are talking about the complete redrawing of every single coastline on Earth. Now, if you're thinking, okay, but that's just a computer model, this next part is what should really send a chill down your spine. The scientists point out that the amount of CO2 in our atmosphere right now is the same as it was during the Pliocene epoch, about 3 million years ago. And you know what happened during the Pliocene? The West Antarctic ice sheet collapsed. The planet has literally run this exact same experiment before, and we have the notes. We know how it ends. It's like finding Earth's old lab notebook and realizing it's describing our current situation perfectly. It just begs the terrifying question, have we already crossed the point of no return? And while the world's big powers are debating, the nations on the front lines, they're getting desperate and creative. Take the tiny island nation of Nauru. They are literally staring down the barrel of this sea level rise. So today, they approved their first climate citizens. Basically, you invest in their projects to build seawalls and other defenses, and you get a passport. It's a wild glimpse of the future, selling citizenship as a survival strategy. A melting continent can feel abstract. This is not. This chart shows what experts are calling a quiet catastrophe unfolding in Central America's dry corridor. It's a stretch of land across Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. These are places where for generations, families have farmed maize and beans. Their entire lives depend on the predictable rhythm of the seasons. But that rhythm is broken. The planet is pushing back with unpredictable, erratic rainfall. It's either a devastating drought or it's sudden flooding rains that just wash all the crops away. This isn't a political crisis at its root. It's a climate crisis. And food insecurity is such a polite clinical term for families not knowing where their next meal is coming from. It's a slow-motion disaster that rarely makes the big headlines, but it is one of the single biggest drivers of migration, of people leaving their homes to make that dangerous journey north. The pressure from the planet creates pressure on people, which in turn creates pressure on borders. See? It's all connected. So we've seen pressure from nations playing chess, and we've seen pressure from the planet itself. Now for Act 3, we're going to zoom in even further and see how all those pressures squeeze our own societies from the inside. This is all about the struggles within countries, the fights over who gets to hold power, the deep anxiety over whether you can build a stable life, and these slow-moving crises that can threaten a nation's very future from within. Let's start with a classic move from the aspiring dictator's playbook. We're calling it third termism.
though in the case of the Ivory Coast's President Ouattara, he's actually aiming for a fourth term. The script is always the same. A leader enjoys being in power, the constitutional term limit gets closer, and then, suddenly, they discover a convenient legal loophole or a popular demand from the people for them to stay on. It's always sold as being necessary for stability, but let's be real, it's a classic power grab. And today in the Ivory Coast, as you'd expect, thousands of people are in the streets protesting. This is way more than just a local story. It's a critical test for democratic institutions all across West Africa. Will the Constitution hold, or will the will of one man win out? It's a drama playing out in capitals all over the globe. All right, now for a type of pressure that might feel a whole lot closer to home for many of you. In the US, a new class of college graduates is stepping out into the toughest job market in over a decade. The social contract they were sold, go to school, get a degree, get a good job, it feels broken. As we put it, the diploma-to-desk pipeline is clogged. And this isn't just bad luck. It's a perfect storm of economic anxiety, high inflation, and entire industries being completely reshaped by AI and automation. Companies are nervous about hiring, and those entry-level jobs that used to be a reliable first step on the career ladder, they're either disappearing or they're demanding years of prior experience. And this creates this huge cloud of stress for an entire generation that feels like they played by the rules, only to find out someone changed the game on them. And for our last look at these internal pressures, let's go to South Korea for a truly mind-bending national security threat. I mean it. Forget the missiles from the north for just a second. The single biggest danger to South Korea's future might be a lack of babies. No, this is not a joke. Their military has shrunk by 20% in just 6 years. Why? Because their birth rate is the lowest in the entire world. The demographic time bomb that experts have been warning about for decades has finally landed, and it's landed squarely in the army barracks. Just think about that. This is a nation that is still technically at war, with a very hostile neighbor just miles away. And its most profound long-term threat isn't an invasion, but a simple lack of its own people. It's forcing the government to ask questions they never thought they'd have to. Can robots replace soldiers? Do we need more drone warfare? Do we change our laws about who has to serve? It is a silent crisis that could reshape the security of the entire region. Okay, geopolitics, climate disasters, social strife, I know. It's a lot. And if we stop the story right there, it would be incredibly depressing. But that is never, ever the full story of any given day on this planet. So for our final act, we're going to change our perspective. We are going to look for the stories of ingenuity, of discovery, and just plain wonder that prove we are so much more than just our problems. It's time to look up. So in the Himalayan region of Uttarkashi, recent flash floods turned peaceful rivers into these raging torrents. They washed away roads, they washed away bridges, and they left thousands of villagers completely isolated. No food, no medicine, no way out. But then the Indian Army's Corps of Engineers arrived, and these are soldiers whose weapons are wrenches and steel girders. In an incredible feat of rapid construction, they assembled a 90-foot Bailey Bridge, which is kind of like a giant life-saving metal Lego set, right across the chasm. And in just a matter of hours, a lifeline was restored. It's just a perfect example of human ingenuity staring right into the chaos of nature and saying, "Not today." It shows how the same organizations that are built for conflict can be this incredible force for creation and for rescue. From an engineering marvel of today, we're going to go back in time, way, way back. On the Indonesian island of Sulawesi, archaeologists found a few pieces of chipped stone. That's it, just some rocks. But these stones have been dated to 1.5 million years old. Let that sink in for a second. 1.5 million years. This discovery completely torches our old maps of early human migration. It means that long, long before we ever thought possible, some ancient, distant relative of ours, not even Homo sapiens, was smart enough and brave enough to figure out how to navigate across the open sea to get to these islands. Can you even imagine that journey? It's incredible. With just a few forgotten stones, the first chapter of the human story just got a massive rewrite, reminding us that we're still piecing together our own origin story. And that brings us to our last piece of news for the day, and honestly, it's my favorite. It's happening right above your head. Tonight and tomorrow is the peak of the Perseid meteor shower. And as an extra little treat, Venus and Jupiter are putting on a show, appearing incredibly close together in the pre-dawn sky.
You know, after a day spent untangling all of our earthly pressures and problems, this is a gift. It's a perfect reminder to just step outside, get away from the screens, and look up. To watch a silent, beautiful show that has been running for billions of years and will run for billions more. It operates on a scale that makes our conflicts feel small and our anxieties feel temporary. It's a free ticket to a moment of perspective, and it's available to every single person on this complicated, struggling, and absolutely wonderful planet.
So that's our world on August 11th, 2025. You know, our whole goal here is just to give you the dots so that you can connect them for yourself without all the noise and the emotional spin. We're a small team, and we are proudly listener-supported, which basically means we answer to you and not to corporate or government interests. That's how we keep this independent. If you value this no-nonsense approach, the most powerful thing you can do to help us is to just share this explainer with a friend. That helps us grow more than you know. And of course, you can find us on Instagram at global.oneread. And to make sure you never miss a day, follow us on Spotify and YouTube to listen to this podcast every morning at 8 a.m. GMT. Thank you so much for spending some of your valuable time with us today. We really hope we've given you a little bit of fresh perspective on the day's events.
We'll be back tomorrow with a whole new day to explore and connect. Until then, stay curious.